The Poppy War, Book 1 of the Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Kuang. Dedication. This is for Iris. Part 1. Chapter 1. Take your clothes off. Rin blinked. What? The proctor glanced up from his booklet. Cheating prevention protocol. He gestured across the room to a female proctor. Go with her if you must. Rin crossed her arms slightly across her chest and walked toward the second proctor. She was light behind a screen, patted thoroughly to make sure she hadn't backed test materials up any orifices. Then handed a formless blue sack. Put this on, said the proctor. Is this really necessary? Rin's teeth chattered as she stripped. The exam smock was too large for her. The sleeves draped over her hands so that she had to roll them up several times. Yes. The proctor motioned for her to sit down on the bench. Last year, 12 students were caught with paper sewn into the linings of their shirts. We take precautions. Open your mouth. Rin obliged. The proctor prodded her tongue with a slim rod. No discoloration. That's good. Eyes wide open. Why would anybody drug themselves before a test? Rin asked as the proctor stretched her eyelids. The proctor didn't respond. Satisfied, she waved Rin down the hallway where other prospective students walked in a straggling line. Their hands were empty, faces uniformly tight with anxiety. They had brought no materials to the test. Pens could be hollowed out to contain scrolls with answers written on them. Hands out where we can see them, ordered the male proctor, walking to the front of the line. Sleeves must remain rolled up past the elbow. From this point forward, you do not speak to one another. If you have to urinate, raise your hand. We have a bucket in the back of the room. What if I have to shit? A boy asked. A proctor gave him a long look. It's a 12-hour test, the boy said defensively. The proctor shrugged. Try to be quiet. Rin had been too nervous to eat anything that morning. Even the thought of food made her nauseated. Her bladder and intestines were empty. Only her mind was full, crammed with an insane number of mathematical formulas and poems and treatises and historical dates to be spelled out in the test booklet. She was ready. The examination room fit 100 students. The desks were arranged in neat rows of 10. On each desk had a heavy exam booklet, an inkwell, and a writing brush. Most of the other provinces of Nikon had to section off entire town halls to accommodate the thousands of students who attended the exam each year. Tikini Township in Rooster Province was a village of farmers and peasants. Tikini's families needed hands to work the fields more than they did university-educated brats. Tikini only ever used the one classroom. Rin filed into the room along with the other students and took her assigned seat. She wondered how the examinees looked from above. Neat squares of black hair, uniform blue smocks, and brown wooden tables. She imagined them multiplied across identical classrooms throughout the country right now, all watching the water clock with nervous anticipation. Rin's teeth chattered madly in a staccato that she thought everyone could surely hear. And it wasn't just from the cold. She clamped her jaw shut, but the shuddering spread down her limbs to her hands and knees. The writing brush shook in her grasp, dribbling black droplets across the table. Trying to grip him, her full name across the booklet's cover page, Fang Runine. She wasn't the only one who was nervous. Already there were sounds of retching over the bucket in the back of the room. She squeezed her wrist fingers, closing over pale burn scars, and inhaled. Focus. In the corner, a water clock rang softly. Begin, said the examiner. And her test booklets were opened with a flapping noise like a flock of sparrows taken off at once. 2 years ago, on the day Tikini's magistracy had arbitrarily estimated to be her 14th birthday, Rin's foster parents had summoned her into their chambers. This rarely happened. The Fangs liked to ignore Rin until they had a task for her, and then they spoke to her the way they would command a dog. Lock up the store, heating up the laundry, take this packet of opium to the neighbors, and don't leave until you've scalped them for twice what we paid for it. A woman Rin had never seen before sat perched in the guest chair. Her face was completely dusted over what looked like white rice flour, punctuated with caked-up dabs of color in her lips and eyelids. She wore a bright lilac dress dyed with a plum flower pattern cut in a fashion that she would have suited a girl half her age. Her squat figure squeezed over the sides like a bag of grain. Is this the girl? The woman asked. She's a little dark. The inspector won't be too bothered. but it'll drive your price down a bit. Rin had a sudden horrifying suspicion of what was happening. Who are you? She demanded. Sit down, Rin, said Uncle Fang. He reached out with a leathery hand to maneuver her into a chair. Rin immediately turned to flee. Auntie Fang seized her arm and dragged her back. Brief struggle ensued in which Auntie Fang overpowered Rin and dragged her toward the chair. I won't go to a brothel! Rin yelled. She's not from a brothel, you idiot, Auntie Fang snapped. Show some respect to Matchmaker Lu. Matchmaker Lu looked unfazed as if her line of work often involved accusations of sex trafficking. You're about to be a very lucky girl, sweet, said. Her voice was bright and falsely saccharine. Would you like to hear why? Rin clutched the edge of her chair at Matchmaker Lu's red lips. No. Matchmaker Lu's smile tightened. Aren't you a dear? It turned out that after a long, arduous search, Matchmaker Lu had found a man in Ticketing willing to marry Rin. He was a wealthy merchant who made a living importing pig's ears and shark fins. He was twice divorced and 3 times her age. Isn't that wonderful? Matchmaker Lu beamed. Rin bolted for the door. She had made 2 steps where Auntie Fang's hand shot out and seized her wrist. Rin knew what came next. She braced herself for the blow, but the kicks to her ribs with the bruises wouldn't show, but Auntie Fang only dragged her back her chair. You will behave, she whispered in her clenched teeth, promised punishment to come. Not now. Not in front of Matchmaker Lu. Auntie Fang liked to keep her cruelly private. Matchmaker Lu blinked obvious. Don't be scared, sweet. This is exciting. Rin felt dizzy. She twisted around to face her foster parents, fighting to keep her voice level. I thought you needed me at the shop. Somehow it was the only thing she could think to say. Kesuke can run the shop, Auntie Fang said. Kesuke's 8. I'll grow up soon enough, Auntie Fang's eyes glittered. And your prospective husband happens to be the village import inspector. Rin understood then. The Fangs were making a simple trade. 1 foster orphan in exchange for a near monopoly over Ticketing's black market and opium. Uncle Fang took a long draught with thick glowing smoke. He's a rich man. You'll be happy. No, the Fangs would be happy. They'd get to import opium in bulk without bleeding money for bribes. But Rin kept her mouth clamped shut. Further argument will only bring pain. It was clear that the Fangs would have her married if they had to drag her in the bridal bed themselves. They had never wanted Rin. They'd taken her in as an infant only because the Empress's mandate after the Second Poppy War enforced households with fewer than 3 children to adopt more orphans who otherwise would have become thieves and beggars. Since infanticide was frowned upon in Ticony, the Fangs had to put Rin to use as a shop girl and opium runner since she was old enough to count. Still, for all the free labor she provided, the cost of Rin's keep and feed was more than the Fangs cared to bear. Now was the chance to get rid of the financial burden she posed. Miss Martian could afford to feed and clothe Rin for the rest of her life, Matchmaker Lu explained. All she had to do was serve him tenderly like a good wife and give him babies and take care of his house, which, as Matchmaker Lu pointed out, had not 1 but 2 indoor washrooms. It was a much better deal than a war orphan like Rin with family and no family connections could otherwise hope to secure. Husband for Rin, money for the matchmaker, and drugs for the Fangs. Wow, Rin said faintly. Rin seemed to wobble under her feet. That's great, really great, terrific. Matchmaker Lu beamed again. Rin, concealed her panic, fought to keep her breathing even until the matchmaker had been ushered out. She bowed low to the Fangs, and like a filial foster daughter expressed her thanks for the pains they had gone through to secure such a stable future. She returned to the store. She worked silently until dark, took orders, filed inventory, and marked new orders in the ledger. The thing about inventory was that one had to be very careful with how one marked the numbers. So simple to make a 9 look like an 8, easier to still make a 1 look like a 7. Long after the sun disappeared, Rin closed the shop and closed the door behind her. Then she shoved a pack of stolen opium under her shirt and ran. Rin, a small, wizened man, opened the library door and peeked out at her. Great tortoise, what are you doing in here? It's pouring. I came to return a book, she said, holding on a waterproof satchel. Also, I'm getting married. Oh, what? Come in. Dear Fayrick taught her tuition for evening to the evening class to the peasant children of Ticony who otherwise would have grown up illiterate. Rin trusted him above anyone else, and she understood his weaknesses better than anyone else. That made him the linchpin of her escape plan. The vase is gone, she observed, as she glanced around the Clamp Library. Tutor Fayrick lit a small flame in the fireplace and dragged 2 cushions in front of it. He mentioned for her to sit down. Bad call. Bad night overall, really. Tutor Fayrick had an unfortunate adoration for divisions, an immensely popular game played in Ticony's gambling dens. It wouldn't have been so dangerous if he were better at it. That makes sense. Tutor Fayrick said Tutor Fayrick after recounted to him the matchmaker's tidings. What are the things making you off? Aren't you the best source of unpaid labor? Yes, but I think I'll be more useful in the airport inspector's bed. Tutor Fayrick looked revolted. Your folks are assholes. So you'll do it? She said. Hopefully you'll help. He said, my dear girl, if your family had let you study with me when you were younger, we might have considered this. I told Banks this. I told her you might have potential, but at this stage, you're speaking of the impossible. But, he held up a hand, more than 20,000 students take the KGU each year, and only 3,000 enter the academies, with those barely a handful test in from Tiffany. You'd be competing against wealthy children, merchant children, nobles children who have been studying for this their entire lives. But I've taken classes with you too. How hard can it be? He chuckled at that. You can read. You can use an abacus. That's not the kind of preparation it takes to pass the KGU. The KGU tests for a deep knowledge of history, advanced mathematics, logic, and the classics. The foreign noble subjects, I know, she said impatiently. But I'm a fast reader. I know more characters than most of the students, most of the adults in this village, certainly more than the Fangs. I can keep up with your students if you just let me try. I don't even have to attend recitation. I just need books. Reading books is one thing, Tutor Fayrick said. Preparing for the KGU is a different endeavor entirely. My KGU students spend their whole lives studying for it, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week. You spend more time than that working in the shop. I can study at the shop, she protested. Don't you have actual responsibilities? I'm good at multitasking. He had her skeptically for a moment, then shook his head. You only have 2 years. It can't be done. But I don't have any other options, she said shrilly. And taking an unmarried girl like Rin was worse less than a gay rooster. She could spend her life as a foot servant in some rich household if she found the right people to bribe. Otherwise, her options were some combination of prostitution and begging. She was being dramatic, but not hyperbolic. She could leave town probably with enough stolen opium to take it to any other province. Where to? She had no friends or family, no one to come to her aid if she was robbed or kidnapped. She had no marketable skills. She had never left Tiffany. She didn't know the first thing about survival in the city. And if they caught her with that much opium on her person, opium possession was a capital offense she'd be dragged into the town square and publicly beheaded as the latest casualty in the Empress's fuel war on drugs. She only had this option. She had to sway Tutor Fayrick. She held up the book she had come to return. This is Mingsy, Reflections on Statecraft. I've only had this for 3 days, right? Yes, he said without checking his ledger. Hand it to him. Read me a passage, any will do. Tutor Fayrick looked skeptical, but flipped to the middle of the book to humor her. The feeling of commiseration is the principle of benevolence, she finished. The feeling of shame and dislike is the principle of righteousness. The feeling of modesty and complaisance is the principle of propriety, and the feeling of approving and disapproving is the principle of knowledge. Raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? No clue, she admitted. It means at all. I just memorized him. He flipped toward the end of the book, selected another passage to read. Order is present in the earthly kingdoms where all beings understand their place. All beings understand their place when they fulfill the roles set out for them. The fish does not attempt to fly, the polecat does not attempt to swim. Only when each being respects the heavenly order may there be peace. He shut the book and looked up. How about this passage? Do you understand what it means? She knew what Tutor Fayrick was trying to tell him. And the Kara believed in strictly defined social roles, a rigid hierarchy that were all locked into earth. Everything had its own place under heaven. Princes become warlords, cadets become soldiers, and the orphan shop girls from Tiffany should be content with remaining orphan shop girls from Tiffany. The KGU was a purportedly meritocratic institution, but only the wealthy class ever had the money to afford the tutors their children actually needed to actually pass. Well, fuck the heavenly order of things. If getting married to a gross old man was a preordained role on earth, then Ren was determined to rewrite it. It means I'm very good at memorizing long passages of gibberish, she said. Tutor Fayrick was silent for a moment. You don't have an eidetic memory, she said finally. It's hard to read, I would have known. I don't, she acknowledged, but I'm stubborn, I study hard, and I really don't want to be married. It took me 3 days to memorize Minxie. It was a short book, but I'll probably need a full week for the longer text. How many texts are on the list? 20, 30, 27. Then I'll memorize them all, every single one. That's all you need to pass the KGU. The other subjects aren't that hard. It's the classics that trip people up. You told me that yourself. Tutor Fayrick's eyes were narrowing now, his expression no longer skeptical but calculated. She knew that look. It was a look when he was trying to predict his returns to divisions. A neat kind of tutor success was tied to his reputation for KG results. You attracted clients if your students made into an academy. More students meant more money, and to an indebted gambler like Tutor Fayrick, each new student counted. If Rin tested into an academy, an ensuing influx of students could get Tutor Fayrick out of some nasty debts. Enrollment's been slow this year, hasn't it? She pressed. He grimaced. It's a drought year. Of course, admission is slow. Not many families want to pay tuition when their children barely have a chance to pass regardless. But I can pass, she said, and when you do, you'll have a student who tests into an academy. What do you think that'll do for enrollment? He shook his head. Rin, I couldn't take your tuition money in good faith. That posed a second problem. She slowly nerved and looked him in the eye. That's okay, I can't pay tuition, he balked visibly. I don't make anything at the store, Rin said before he could speak. The inventory isn't mine. I don't get any wages. I need you to help me for the study for the KG at no cost, and twice as fast as you train your other students. Tutor began to shake his head again. My dear girl, I can't. This is time to play our last card. Rin pulled her leather satchel from under her chair and plunked it on the table. It would with a solid, satisfying smack. Tutor Fayrick's eyes followed her eagerly and slipped a hand into the satchel and drew out one heavy, sweet-smelling packet. And then another, and then another. This is 6 tael worth of premium opium, she said calmly. 6 tael was half of what Tutor Fayrick might earn in an entire year. She stole this from the Fangs, he said uneasily. She shrugged. Smuggling's a difficult business. The Fangs know the risk. Packages go missing all the time. They can hardly report it to the magistrate. Twirled his long whiskers. I don't want to get on the Fangs' bad side. He had good reason to fear. People in Tickney didn't cross Auntie Fang. Not if they cared about their personal safety. She was patient and unpredictable as a snake. She might let faults going unacknowledged for years and then strike within a well-placed poisonous polyp. But Rin had covered her tracks. One of her shipments was confiscated by port authorities last week, and said, and she hasn't had time to do inventory yet. I've just marked these packets as lost. She can't trace them. They could still beat you. Not so badly, Rin forced a shrug. They can't marry off damaged merchandise. Tutor Fayrick was staring at the satchel with obvious great deal. She snatched it out of his reach. 4 conditions. 1, you teach me. 2, you teach me for free. 3, you don't smoke when you're teaching me. And 4, if you tell anyone where you got this, I'll let your creditors know where to find you. Tutor Fayrick glared at her for one moment and then nodded. She cleared her throat. Also, I want to keep this book. He gave her a wry smile. You would make a terrible prostitute, no charm. No, said Auntie Fang. We need you in the shop. I'll study at night, Rin said, or during off hours. Auntie Fang's face pinched together as she scrubbed at the frying wok. Everything about Auntie Fang was raw. Her expression on display of impatience and irritation. Her fingers red from hours of cleaning and laundering, her voice hoarse from screaming at Rin, at her son Kaseiji, at her hired smugglers, at Uncle Fang, lying inert in a smoke-filled room. What did you promise him? She demanded suspiciously. Rin stiffened. Nothing. Auntie Fang abruptly slammed the wok into the counter. Rin flinched, suddenly terrified that her theft had been discovered. What is so wrong with getting married? Auntie Fang demanded. I married your uncle when I was younger than you are now. Every other girl in this village will get married by her 16th birthday. Do you think you're so much better than them? Rin was so relieved that she had to remember to look properly chastised. No, I don't. Do you think it will be so bad? Auntie Fang's voice became dangerously quiet. What is it really? Are you afraid of sharing his bed? Rin hadn't even considered that, but now the very thought of it made her throat close up. Auntie Fang's lip curled in amusement. The first thing is the worst, I'll give you that. Keep a wad of cotton in your mouth so you don't bite your tongue. Do not cry out unless he wants you to. Keep your head down and do as he says. Become his mute little household slave until he trusts you. Once he has you start playing him with opium, just a little bit at first, though I doubt he's never smoked before. Then you give him more and more every day. Do it at night after he's finished with you, so he always associates it with pleasure and power. Give him more and more until he's fully dependent on you, and on you, then destroy his body and his mind. You'll be more or less married to a breathing corpse. Yes, which will have his riches, his estates, his power. Auntie Fang tilted her. Then will it hurt you so much to share his bed? Rin wanted to vomit, but is it the children you're afraid of? Auntie Fang cocked her head. There are ways to kill him in the wing. We work in the apothecary, you know that, but you want to give him at least one son. Cement your position as his first wife so he can further... But I don't want that, Rin choked out. I don't want to be like you. And who cares what you want? Auntie Fang asked softly. You are a war orphan. You have no parents, no standing, no connections. You're lucky the inspector doesn't care that you're not pretty, only that you're young. This is the best I could do for you. There will be no more chance. But the Keiju... Auntie Fang moved. When did you get to the league? You think you're going to an academy? I do think so. Ren straightened her back, trying to inject confidence into her words. Calm down, you still have leverage. And you'll let me, because one day the authorities might start asking where the opium's coming from. Auntie Fang examined her for a long moment. Do you want to die? Ren knew that this wasn't an empty threat. Auntie Fang was more than willing to tie up her loose ends. Ren had watched her do it before. She'd spent most of her life trying to make sure she never became a loose end. But now she could fight back. If I go missing, the tutor favorite will tell the authorities precisely what happened to me. And I'll tell your son what you've done. Kasegi won't care. Hank scoffed. I raised Kasegi. He loves me. And said, and you love him. You don't want him to know what you do. That's why you don't send him into the shop. And why you make me keep him in our room when you go out to meet your smugglers. That did it. Auntie Fang stared at her, her mouth gaped, nostrils flaring. Let me at least try it, Ren begged. It can't hurt you to let me study. If I pass, then you'll at least be rid of me, and if I fail, you're still a bride. Auntie Fang grabbed at the Walkman, but Auntie Fang only resumed scrubbing it on the bench. You're studying this shop, and I'll throw you out in the streets, Auntie Fang said. I don't need this getting back to the inspector. Deal, Ren lied through her teeth. And what happens if you get in? Who's going to pay your tuition? First tutor. Ren hesitated. She knew Robin the Fangs might give her the dowry money as tuition, but she could see now that that had been an idiotic hope. Tuition at Syndergaard is free, she pointed out. Anything laughed out. Syndergaard? You think you're going to test in Syndergaard? I could. The military academy at Syndergaard was the most prestigious institution in the empire, training graduate future generals and statesmen, rarely recruited from the rural south of ever. You are deluded. Feeling smart again. Fine, study if you like, if that makes you happy. By all means, take the Keiju, and when you fail, you will marry that inspector, and you will be grateful. That night, cradling a stolen cradle on the floor of the cramped bedroom that she shared with Kasegi, Ren cracked open her first Keiju primer. The Keiju tested the four noble subjects: history, mathematics, logic, and the classics. The imperial bureaucracy in Syndergaard considered these subjects integral to the development of a scholar and a statesman. Ren had to learn them all by her 16th birthday. She had a tight schedule for herself. She was to finish at least 2 books every week and to rotate between 2 subjects a day. Each night after she had closed up shop, she ran her tutor Favorite's house before returning home, arms laden with more books. History was the easiest to learn. Econ history was a highly entertaining saga of constant warfare. The Empire had formed a millennium ago under the mighty sword of the merciless Red Emperor, who destroyed the monastic orders scattered across the continent and created a unified state of unprecedented size. It was the first time the Nikara people had ever conceived of themselves as a single nation. The Red Emperor standardized the Nikara language, issued a uniform set of weights and measurements, and built a system of roads that could connect to the sprawling territory. But the newly conceived Nikara Emperor did not survive under the Red Emperor's death. His many years turned the country into a bloody mess during the era of warring states that followed, which divided Nikon into 12 rival provinces. Since then, the massive country has been reunified, conquered, exploited, shattered, and then unified again. Nikon had in turn been at war with the Khans of the northern hinterlands and the tall westerners from across the Great Sea. Both times Nikon had proven itself too massive to suffer foreign occupation for very long. Of all Nikon's attempted conquerors, the Federation of Mugen had come the closest. The island country had been attacking Nikon at a time when domestic turmoil between the provinces was at its peak. It took 2 pulpy wars and 50 years of bloody occupation for Nikon to win back its independence. The Emperor Sundaji, the last living member of the Troiku, had seized control of the state during the Second Poppy War and now ruled over a land of 12 provinces that had never quite managed to achieve the same unity that the Red Emperor had imposed. The Nikara Empire had proven itself as historically unconquerable, but it was also unstable and disunited, and the current spell of peace held no promise of durability. If there was one thing we had learned about our country's history, it was that the only permanent thing about the Nikara Empire was war. The second subject, mathematics, was a slog. It wasn't overly challenging but tedious and tiresome. The Keiju did not filter for genius mathematicians, but rather for students who could keep up things such as the country's finances and balance books. Rin had been doing accounting for the things that she could add. She was naturally apt to juggling long sums in her head. She still had to bring herself up to the speed of the more abstract trigonometric theorems, which she assumed mattered for naval battles, but she found that learning those was pleasantly straightforward. The third section, logic, was entirely foreign to her. The Keiju posed logic riddles as open-ended questions. She flipped open a sample exam for practice. The first question, as June read, a scholar traveling a well-trodden road passes a pear tree. The tree is laden with fruit so heavy that branches sway, yet he does not pick the fruit. Why? Because it's not his pear tree, Ren thought immediately, because the owner might be Auntie Fang and break his head open with a shovel. But those responses were either moral or contingent. The answer to the riddle had to be contained within the question itself. There must be some fallacy, some contradiction in the given scenario. Rin had to think for a long while before she came up with the answer. The tree by a well-traveled road had this much fruit, there must be something wrong with the fruit. The more she practiced, the more she came to see questions as games. Cracking them was very rewarding. Rin drew diagrams in the dirt, studied the structures of syllogisms, and memorized the more common logical fallacies. Within months, she could answer these kinds of questions in mere seconds. Her worst subject by far was the classics. It was the exception to her rotating schedule. She had to study classics every day. The section of the Keiju required students to recite, analyze, and compare texts of a predetermined canon of 27 books. These books were written not in the modern script, but in the old Nikado language, which was notorious for unpredictable grammar patterns and tricky pronunciations. The books contained poems, philosophical treatises, and essays on statecraft written by the legendary scholars in Nikon's past. They were meant to shape the moral character of the nation's future statesmen, and they were, without exception, hopelessly confusing. Unlike with logic and mathematics, Rin could not reason her way out of classics. Classics required a knowledge that most students had been slowly building since they could read. In 2 years, Rin had accumulated more than 5 years of constancy. To that end, she achieved extraordinary feats of rote memorization. She recited backward while walking along the edges of the old defensive walls in a circle tikini. She recited a double speak while hopping across posts over the lake. She mumbled to herself in the snore, snapping in irritation when customers asked for help. She would not let herself sleep unless she had recited that day's lessons without error. She woke up chanting classical analogues, which terrified Kaseki, who thought she had been possessed by goats. In a way, she had been. She dreamed of ancient poems by long-dead voices and woke up shaking from nightmares where she'd gotten them wrong. The way of heaven operates unceasingly and leaves no accumulation of its influence in any particular place, so that all things are brought to perfection by. So does the way operate, and all under the sky turn to them, and all within the sea submit to them. Rin put down Xuanzi's annals and scowled. She did not only did she have no idea what Xuanzi was writing about, she couldn't also see why he had insisted on writing the most irritating possible. She understood very little of what she read. Even the scholars of Yulu Mountain had trouble understanding the classics. She could hardly be expected to glean their meaning on their own. And because she didn't have the time or training to delve into the text, since she could think of no useful mnemonics and shortcuts to learning the classics, she had to simply learn them word by word and hope that would be enough. She walked everywhere with a book. She studied its shape, and when she tired, she conjured up images for herself, telling herself the story of the worst possible future. You walk up in the aisle in a dress that doesn't fit you. Your trimling is waiting for the dinner, and he looks at you like you're a juicy, fattened penguin with a slab of meat for his purchase. He spreads saliva over his dry lips. He doesn't look away from you throughout the entire banquet. When it's over, he carries you to his bedroom and pushes you onto the sheets. Try to squeeze her eyes shut, resume. Rin's 15th birthday showed a vast quantity of ancient Ikara literature in her head, and could recite the majority of it, but she was still making mistakes, missing words, switching up complex clauses, mixing up the order of the sentences. She was good enough, she knew, to test into a teacher's college or a medical academy. She suspected she might even test into the Scholars Institute of Yulu Mountain, Wailu Mountain, where the most brilliant minds in the continent produced stunning works of literature and pondered the mysteries of the natural world, but she could not afford any of those academies. She had to test in the percentage of students, not just in the village, but in the entire country. Otherwise, her 2 years of study would be wasted. She had to make her memory Perfect. She stopped sleeping. Her eyes became bloodshot, swollen. Her head swam from days of cramming. When she visited Vieira at his home one night to pick up a new set of books, her gaze was desperate and focused. She had passed him as he spoke. His words drifted over her head like crowds. She barely registered his presence. Rin, look at me. He exhaled sharply, holding up. Yes, I can't do it, she whispered. I only have 2 more months and I can't do it. And quickly as I put in, her chest rose and fell very quickly. Oh, Rin, words spoke from her mouth. She spoke about what happens if I don't pass? What if I get married after all? I guess I could go and smother him in his sleep, you know. But I had his fortune, that would be fun, wouldn't it? She began to laugh hysterically, tears rolling her cheeks. It's easier than doping him out. No one would ever know. She her favorite rose quickly and pulled out a stew. Sit down, child. And trembled. I can't. I still have to get through Fuzi's, you know. And your favorite rose quickly and pulled out a stool. Sit down, child. And trembled. I can't. I still have to get through Fuzi's analytics before tomorrow. Run in. Sit. Sitting into the stool, dear Fairy sat down opposite her and took her hands in his. I'll tell you a story, he said. Once, not too long ago, there lived a scholar from a very poor family. He was too weak to work long hours in the field, and his only chance of providing for his parents in their old age was to win a government position so that he might receive a stipend. To do this, he had to matriculate in an academy. With the last of his earnings, the scholar bought a set of textbooks and registered for the KG. He was very tired because he toiled in the fields all day and could only study at night. Her shoulders heaved and she suppressed a yawn. Tutor Fayrick snapped his fingers in front of her eyes. The scholar had to find a way to stay him, so he pinned the end of his braid to the ceiling so that every time he drew it forward, his hair would yank at his scalp and the pain would just awaken him. Tutor Fayrick smiled sympathetically. You're almost there, and just a little further. Please do not commit spousal homicide. But she had stopped listening. The pain made him focus, she said. That's not really what I was trying to... The pain made him focus. Pain could make her focus. So Rin took a candle by her book, stripping hot wax on her arm. She nodded off. Her eyes were water and pain. She would wipe her tears away, and she would resume her studies. The day she took the exam, her arms were covered with burn scars. Afterward, she had stopped listening. The day she took the exam, her arms were covered with burn scars. Afterward, Tutor Fayrick asked her how the test went. She couldn't tell him days later. She couldn't remember those horrible draining hours. They were a gap in her memory. When she tried to recall how she answered a particular question, her brain seized up and did not let her relive it. She didn't want to relive it. She never wanted to think about it again. 7 days until the scores were out. Every book in the province had to be checked, double-checked, and triple-checked. For Rin, those days were unbearable. She hardly slept. For the past 2 years, she filled her days with frantic studying. Now she had nothing to do. Her future was out of her hands, and knowing that made her feel far worse. She drove everyone else mad with her fretting. She made mistakes at the shop. She created a mess out of her inventory. Not the case, Jean fought with the Finks more than she should have. More than once she considered stealing another pack of opium and smoking it. She had heard of women in the village committing suicide by swallowing opium nuggets whole. In the dark hours of the night, she considered that too. Everything hung in suspended animation. She felt as if she were drifting, her whole existence reduced to a single score. She thought about making contingency plans, preparations to escape the village if she hadn't tested out after all, but her mind refused to linger on the subject. She could not possibly conceive of life after the Keiju because there might not be a life after the Keiju. Rin grew so desperate that for the first time in her life she prayed. The Fangs were far from religious. They visited the village temple sporadically at best, most exchanged packs of opium behind the golden altar. They were hardly alone in their lack of religious devotion. Once the monastic orders had exerted even greater influence on the country than the warlords did now, but then the Red Emperor had come crashing through the continent with his glorious quest for unification, leaving slaughtered monks and empty temples in his wake. The monastic orders were gone out, but the gods remained. Numerous deities that represented every category, from sweeping themes of love and warfare to the mundane concerns of kitchens and households. Some of those traditions were kept alive by devout worshippers who had gone into hiding, but most villagers in Tikini frequented the temples only out of ritualistic habit. No one truly believed, at least no one who dared to admit it to Ninkara, that gods were only relics of the past. Subjects of myths and legends, but no more. But Rin wasn't taking any chances. She stole out of the shop early one afternoon for an offering of dumplings and plinths of the four gods. The temple was very quiet. At midday, she was the only one inside. Four sages gazed mutely at her. Rin hesitated before them, but she was not entirely certain which one she ought to pray to. She knew their names, of course: the white tiger, black tortoise, azure dragon, and the vermilion bird. And she knew that they represented the four cardinal directions. But they formed only a small subset of the vast pantheon of deities that were worshipped in Nikan. This temple also bore shrines to smaller guardian gods whose likenesses hung on scrolls draped over the walls. So many gods. So many gods. Which was the god of test scores? Which was the god of unmarried child girls who wished to stay that way? If you exist, if you're up there, help me, get me a way out of this shithole. If you can't do that, please give the importance back to Victor. She looked around the empty temple. What came next? She had always imagined that praying involved more than just speaking out loud. Despite several unused insects lined with the altar, she lit the end of one of them by dipping it in the brazier, then waved experimentally at the ends. Was she supposed to hold smoke to the gods, or should she smoke the stick herself? She had just held the burn. They blinked into her, slowly removing the incense stick from her. Hello, she said, I'm praying. Please leave, he said. Exam results were to be posted out at noon outside the examination hall. Rin closed up shop early and went down to with tutor Fayrick half an hour in advance. A large crowd had already gathered around post, so they found a shady corner 100 meters and they waited. So many people had accumulated by the hall that Rin couldn't see when the scrolls were posted, but she knew shouting. And the crowd was pushing forward, pressing Rin and tutor Fayrick into the fold. Her heartbeat was so fast that she could hardly breathe. She couldn't see anything except the backs of the people before her. She thought she might vomit. When they finally got to the front, it took Rin a long time to find her name. She scanned the lower half of the scroll, hardly daring to breathe. Surely she hadn't scored well enough to make the top 10. You didn't see Fang Rin and everywhere. Only when she looked at Tutor Fayrick saw that he was crying did she realize what had happened. Her name was at the very top of the scroll. She hadn't placed in the top 10. She placed at the top in the entire village, the entire province. She bribed a teacher, stolen opium, burned herself, lied to her foster parents at Dornberg in a marriage deal, and she was going to Sinigard.